We're going live right now. What's up, everybody? It's your boy Montoya Smith. I am the mental activist, and welcome to episode 2 of Politically Conscious. These are our pop-up shows. I am your mental activist. Y'all probably know me from Mental Dialogue, but for those who don't know, I know a little something about politics, but I'm really just a philosopher, get into psychology, and so I wanted to bring on a couple of special brothers. I'm hoping to get the other brother on here pretty soon. But if you saw episode 1, you should know Emille Bryant, who's a political analyst, if you will. He got his background popping today. If you will, Emille, you are the political junkie. So I like to bring experts on when we do the hard conversations on race, sex, and culture with mental dialogues. We're going to do the same thing with politics, where I bring on experts in politics, if you will. I got my brother, Shelley Wynter. How you doing, brother?
What's up, Shelley? How you doing? What's going on, Emille? Man, I'm sorry I'm late, y'all. Just came out of a meeting. We got a big man, I gotta tell you, man, election night's gonna be crazy, man. We got a big election watch party. Anybody listening, we'll be at the Grand Hyatt Buckhead. You're hearing it here first. And we're gonna be in now I'm gonna tell y'all, if you're listening and viewing this event, this live stream, if you're a Democrat, you probably don't want to come, because it's going to be mad smack talking when this guy wins in the landslide, and you're going to just get mad and want to leave.
So you jumping the gun now. You just jumped the predictions. You just jumping the gun now. Yeah, you're jumping the gun. But I'll introduce you to Emille real quick. So Emille, you are a political junkie, if you will.
I lost you.
Oh, you can't hear me? Can you see me?
I can hear you. I can see you and everything. You're not chopped up a little bit. I got you.
No problem. But yeah, I was going to jump to Emille real quick. Tell them about your background real quick, Emille. Then we'll introduce them to Shelley again. Then we'll get this thing started. We don't want to keep people waiting.
For sure. Air Force veteran, graduate United States Air Force Academy, did 20 years United States Air Force, been a consultant for Fortune 500 companies, and now I'm an entrepreneur. And along the way, I picked up a ton of knowledge about how to read and understand news, politics, culture, history. And my job in my own life is to decipher what I'm seeing with a lean toward what actually is happening, and have I seen this before in history? And when I do that analysis, I find myself sort of addicted to analyzing current events.
No, I love it. That's why I got you here, brother. Love your background, the double V victory. We might get a chance to highlight that before the evening. So for those who don't know about the double V victory, it's definitely an ode to our ancestors fighting for this country, if you will. Shelley, I know you get off the video, but I don't know if you're actually stepping off for a break, or if you still want to talk, you could just tell them about the Shelley Wynter Show, and then we'll get this episode 2 started.
Yeah. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, brother.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Loud and clear.
Yep. So tell them about your show.
Yep. My name is Shelley Wynter. I'm on WSB 95.5, WSB Atlanta's News and Talk, and Montoya is my good friend, and he wanted to do this podcast, and I said no problem, because Emille I respect a lot, and I know Montoya for many years, and so it's a good way to get my show out there. So please tune in, WSBradio.com, 95.5 FM in Atlanta, Georgia, 7 to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday.
I love it. All right, let's get this thing started. If you were privileged enough to see episode 1, we've got great reviews, just to let both of y'all know, for episode 1. But what we do is we jump into basically political cuts via video, and we just react to them. However, I did want to call out my brother Shelley, because as the political conscious show, Emille talked about on the last show how you got to have context with everything that you present. And so if you recall at the last show, Shelley, you were highlighting how unfortunately one of your good friends got locked up in solitary confinement for the role that he may have played into the, as you said, the non-insurrection on January 6th at the on January 6th, if you will, because he was just filming of those that went in. And so, can you hear me, Shelley? I don't know if Shelley can hear me.
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, making sure. Okay, so
I can hear you.
Okay, I can hear you. Good. Okay, good. Okay, so what I wanted to call you out was you were saying there was about 700 or 800 people that went in, and you know me, I'm a numbers guy, so I can't help myself, and that's where you at on Politically Conscious. I think it was about 2,000 because it was 700 arrests, and so I was just saying you kind of wrapped up your version of January 6th in a nice little bow, and I like, hey, 15% of 15,000, that's a significant number that went inside, and what we all three of us know that had it been 700 or 800 brothers, there are sisters that went in their capital, it wouldn't have been just unfortunately, one person that lost their life of those that went into it. So I just wanted to kind of call you out. You got to get the numbers right on the Politically Conscious, man. When you lean it one way, we're going to call it out and say, hey, it was 2,500. And as far as your friend go, again, I respect your friend, but I would say he should have been like Ice Cube. He should have been like Trey on Boys in the Hood. He should have got out the car. He stayed in the car. And he spent some time in there, man. So I'm just saying you wrapped it up in a nice little bow. So I just wanted to call that number out, if you will, brother Shelley. But I'll let you respond to it real quick. Again, that's just being conscious and making sure we present the numbers correctly. Shelley, did you? I don't know if you're hearing me, brother. Maybe you're missing me.
I can hear you. I missed that last part. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, I was banging on you a little bit for saying about 700 or 800 people went into the Capitol on January the 6th. I, being a numbers guy, I went and found out that it was about 2,000, maybe 2,500. That's a significant difference on when we were talking about that on the last show, that it was a small crowd that went in on January 6th. And you said it wasn't an insurrection because there was no weapons. And I was just wanting to say, as a politically conscious show, we got to call it at least a weaponless insurrection, because what they did know was
there's no such thing. There's no such thing as a weaponless insurrection.
Listen to what I'm saying. The reason it's a weaponless insurrection, I'm just putting a context on it. The context that I would view it from is they knew you couldn't get nowhere near the Capitol with a bunch of guns. And so I'm just highlighting that we probably should count it as a weaponless insurrection. And I was also messing with you because I think you missed it about your partner that you said all he did was filmed everything and he spent some time, in solitary confinement. And I was making a joke saying he should have been like Trey on Boys in the Hood and got out the car. But since he went in, he caught time too. And I was just being a little facetious with you, but go ahead, brother.
Right. But the thing is, what's interesting to note, first of all, the 2,500 is I think maybe 4 or 5% of the total that were at the Capitol.
15%,
so
15%, just so you know.
Right. That's still a small percentage.
700 was 5%. 2,500, that's a big difference. That's what I'm highlighting. 700, yeah, go ahead though.
But since when is 15% of a total group of people a large number? It's still 15%. 85% did not go into Capitol. So that's how we could play the numbers. But that's not as important. What's as important is that if you are doing an insurrection by definition means you're taking weapons into a place where you can't take weapons. There's no such thing as a weaponless insurrection. If you're trying to take over the government, which is the most heavily armed government in the history of the world, you're going to need weapons. Now, you could call it a riot. Absolutely, it was a riot. But an insurrection, I mean, that's a term that's just, I think, boggles the mind.
Fair enough. Emille, any thoughts? Again, I was just messing with Shelley because my bigger point is we're going to give people the straight numbers. So that's my bigger point. And I was
that's fair.
I'm gonna let that pretzel stay twisted because there was a lot of planning. There was a lot. We can find documentation of planning for the purpose of, say, for instance, November 5th, there was people who scouted the Capitol to know which offices to go to. And I don't call it a weaponless insurrection. It was an insurrection. They didn't have guns. They had weapons. Let's make sure we know the difference between those two. No, it was a gunless insurrection, but it was not a weaponless insurrection. There was a noose outside the Capitol. Maybe it was a prop, maybe it was not. But going to hang Mike Pence with a bunch of people, hundreds of people shouting, hang Mike Pence, going into the Capitol building does not smack of riot. So I'm not here to disagree with Shelley that it wasn't a gunless insurrection, but it was definitely an insurrection with weapons.
And like I said, I was just being when I got curious, looked at the numbers, I was like, oh, let's put this in a little better context. I just wanted to do that. But let's do what we do here. Let's get started with some of our cuts and keep this dialogue going. So I wanted to start here. Shelley, I saw you write about this online, so I'll start with you when we come out of this cut.
Donald Trump has no character. He doesn't give a damn about the Latino community. He's failed businessman. He only cares about the billionaire friends he has and accumulating wealth for those at the top. You know, he says immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. Give me a break. He wants to do away with the birthright citizenship. Who the hell has said that in the last 100 years? And just the other day, a speaker at his rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Well, let me tell you something. I don't know the Puerto Rican that I know, or Puerto Rico where I'm in my home state of Delaware. They're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of Latinos is unconscionable, and it's un-American. It's totally contrary to everything we've done, everything we've been.
So, Shelley, I loved your thought on social media where you highlighted, you was like, there's no way Biden's going for, he's on the same side as Kamala. So I just kind of wanted to let you jump in and highlight what you posted on social media, because I think it was very appropriate just from my perspective, but I'll let you share it yourself.
Well, I've thought since Joe Biden was pushed out. So let's be clear, if January 6th was truly an insurrection, then Joe Biden was a coup. And the removal of Joe Biden from the presidential campaign was a coup. So see what I did there? So anyway, so since Joe Biden was pushed out, I have often seen his actions where I truly believe he does not want her to win. And the reason why he doesn't want her to win makes sense. If she does win, then it would prove the Democrat elites that removed him from the campaign trail and took him away from being able to run for a second term. It would prove them correct that he was going to lose. If she loses, he can always say historically that I would have beat him. So he's not rooting for her to win. We know there's a little animosity between Jill Biden and Vice President Harris, going back to the 2020 debate when Kamala Harris inferred that Joe Biden was racist. We do know the campaign teams have been mashed together, and there's some animosity there. There's some infighting there, according to reporting. So I'm not sure, and I've seen some things, this being one, Joe Biden calling a press conference when Kamala Harris was doing a rally at the same time. When Obama was doing speaking at a rally, Joe Biden was on a live stream or whatever. And because he's a sitting president, you kind of have to cover him because he's the president. And so I've just seen certain things. The biggest thing that really tipped it off to me was on 9/11 when he was at that firehouse and he put on a Trump hat with a bunch of Trump supporters in that fire station, and then walked up Air Force One steps with a red hat in his hand. Wasn't a MAGA hat, but it was a red hat. And so I truly believe that Joe is, he's not on a campaign trail with her. I'm not sure that has to do with him or her. But whoever it is, whether he's unpopular or not, he's the sitting president. You'd probably want him campaigning with you. She just did a rally at the Ellipse the other night, 75,000 people. Joe was literally yards away in the White House, and he wasn't invited. That's when he had that Vote a Latino event going on at the same time. So I don't believe that Joe Biden wants her to win, and it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out.
And Trump showing up with the garbage truck, classic, master salesman, classic.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, Emille, but he knows optics matter. He understands optics. He understands theatrics. And what's more importantly than that, for me personally, what I was impressed with was Joe Biden made those comments. What's today, Thursday? Joe Biden made those comments Tuesday night. And Wednesday afternoon in another state, his campaign was able to procure a brand new garbage truck, wrap it, and put them in it to change a whole news cycle. That shows me that campaign is running on all cylinders as we, finish out this final week.
That's exactly how I saw that as well. Emille, any thoughts to Shelley pushing the idea? And I've been watching Shelley say this for a while, and I actually personally agree. He doesn't appear to be on her side, in his position. So just any thoughts on that as well? From what you're saying.
Quite frankly, I don't care. And I'm not saying that to be flip, but the reason why I don't care is because the challenge that Kamala faces in this campaign is multifold. And one of them is the fact that she was not running a campaign until June. So there's going to be a ton of turmoil. A lot of it's going to look like it's intentional when in fact it's just a lot of turmoil. It's just random. So I'm not going to accuse her of or accuse the Biden campaign of intentionally torpedoing her, but I will say that they certainly haven't gone out of their way to deconflict either, right? So there's a lot of passivity, a lot of that animosity that Shelley mentioned that we see. Do I think Joe Biden wants her to win? I actually do. I think, however, he wants her to win from the policy perspective, although his personal opinion might get in the way of that, which is pushed out because look, that debate that he had, we all saw it. I do not believe that man would have continued to pace as well as Kamala's pacing in this election. I'm sorry, I just don't believe he would have. And he should have not wanted a second term from jump. He should have said, this is my one term. I'm out. I'm going to let the process unfold and let the Democrats do it. And I think had he been pushed in 2021 not to run for re-election, it would be a vastly different picture, including perhaps having a different Democratic nominee. But I do agree that his personal, because, he's been in politics for 50 plus years. So his personal pride has been offended by the fact that he was pushed out because he's too old. And quite frankly, that is something that I think we're seeing in terms of his individual bits and pieces. Systemically, I don't think he wants her to fail, but I think personally, there's some animosity there that we're seeing peek out here and there for sure.
Yeah. And the funny thing to me is just thinking about the age of Biden or whatever, and Trump being 80 as well. And it's kind of like, I see this as an indictment on us as a culture, as a society. Like we're almost about to risk, let's say Trump wins, right? He's about to be 80 and got to do 4 years. He's 80 something and got to do 4 more years. So some of the same stuff that we were worried about Biden, we're kind of set up again with him being that age. And I'm saying that as us as a society.
And I'm not convinced that I think both men are seeing natural, normal cognitive decline at this age. I think both men are showing that. And so the question is, do we as a nation have so shallow a bench that two very geriatric men are considered the prime candidates for president? I know about Trump's market. I think Trump's a brilliant marketer, but marketing doesn't run the government. What runs the government is good policy enforced properly throughout the echelons of the government. And I think that is something that people often get confused. Good marketing, hey, I'll vote for him because I see this image. But let's be real. In my opinion, that rally was the mess that it was. I have another word for it, but I won't use it on this show. But that rally was a mess. And
we ain't politically correct on the mental dialogue. We ain't gonna be politically correct on this show either. So call it what you want.
The thing is that when you spew out the kind of sexism, racism, and the other stuff that you saw, I don't care if you call it a comedy. I don't care if you call it's not going to make the nation better. Will it help your campaign? Sure, but only amongst your most faithful. That's the problem I'm having with both of these campaigns is at least the Harris campaign in some ways, and I won't even accuse them of doing it in broadly, is trying to move something toward the middle. And most of her far left people are mad at her for doing that. But there's at least an attempt to bring something together. That rally, there was no attempt at bringing people from the middle over to Trump's position. That rally was very clearly one-sided, and it was very clearly a lot of vitriol.
It's part of the game, though, Emille. That's part of the game. To be understood that at the end of the day, some of your rallies are going to be a reinforce your base. And I'm not trying to talk about whether it's okay.
I agree. But here's the difference between the two. One person's rallies sounds a lot like some stuff that you wouldn't want to hear on any other day, not a political rally. The other is pretty much what I would hear on any given day, just a lot more emphasis on certain points. But I would not want to walk down the street and hear that stuff on a street corner in DC. I wouldn't. I'd be like, yo, that would be the appropriate place for it, but I don't think that's where we need to be as a nation. So to me,
I respect
that rally was just not the right thing.
I respect your personal. Let's go to another cut and see where we at with this. All right, let's go to. All right, here we go.
I only like Donald Trump because of his economic plan. So when I was getting my master's in economics, one of the things I realized I liked the most about it is that there just wasn't a lot of room for opinions and feelings, right? Like the facts and the data call the winners and losers. And then it was really simple. The only major piece of economic legislation that Trump actually passed when he was president was called the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And the idea is that you give tax cuts to large corporations, not to middle class people. And then when they have all that extra money, they'll pay you more and they'll create more jobs. So he passed that piece of legislation. What happened? Not opinions and feelings, not what do I feel like happened. What did the data actually say happened? The benefits of the tax cut went almost exclusively to the owners, the executives, and the high-paid workers. Did middle-class wages go up? No.
AT&T plans to increase $1,000 special bonus to more than 200,000 U.S. employees, and that's because of what we did.
What actually happened? AT&T got that extra money and then cut somewhere around 30,000 jobs, and then they paid their executives like way more money. In fact, nearly all of America's largest companies spent the majority of their tax cuts from Donald Trump on stock buybacks and dividends and not rewarding their hard workers. But Joshua, I remember the economy was great during the Trump years. First of all, the last 2 years were COVID, so you're only talking about freshman and sophomore year. And you remember freshman and sophomore year being good because he inherited an economy that was booming from Obama. He inherited a 2.4% GDP. He inherited an economy that was already adding around 200,000 jobs a month. He inherited an economy that was already declining in its unemployment rate. Plus, Obama, Biden, and Trump all gave America a stimulus check. Trump's just the only one that put his name on it.
Emille, I'll let you start on this one. Just any thoughts to what you're hearing?
Sure. So the problem with any analysis is, and this is a both sides problem that I can't stand. It is, what's the source of those stats, right? So I look at stats from BLS, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or the Bureau of Economic Statistics, or the Bureau of Justice Statistics. Why? Because that's the most impartial set of statistics I can glean. I also use the Fed when I want numbers about the economy. Any other source, there's a potential for bias that I don't appreciate. So I always use those sources. So when he says those numbers, the first thing I'm looking at is, what are your sources and why do you use those sources versus the sources that are considered the most neutral? And again, none of these sources are neutral or objective, but there's more objective and more neutral. The second thing that I look at when I hear that is, when we talk about economy, the question that I always want to ask is median income versus productivity. That is one of the best measures of economic growth that we have. And for the past 45 years, median income versus productivity has steadily, the gap between the two has steadily risen. Americans are more productive. Unfortunately, their pay does not keep pace with that productivity. So if I saw an indicator that gap was closing, I'd say we have a better economy. But we don't see that gap closing under Biden, under Trump, or under Obama. It's been the same for 40 plus years. It gets wider and wider. That means the economy for people who are making median income is not improving as fast as their ability to make money. So you're seeing that money flow back into large corporations who are then keeping it at the top of those corporations through stock buybacks and bonuses for their executives. That's how I see it. So what he said, I challenge it only because I don't know the sources.
Fair enough. Shelley, any thoughts on that cut?
So here's the thing, and applaud you, Emille, because we think the same way. Tax cuts are for everybody. There's no such thing as a corporate tax cut. When he did the Jobs Tax Cut Act or whatever, it was a tax cut for everybody. That means if you paid taxes, I paid taxes. We paid less as a tax cut. Now, a corporation or a very rich person, when you say they saw more of a benefit, of course they do. by definition, they must, because they pay most of the taxes. They say, like, I think 5% of earners or 5% of earners pay 47% in tax revenue to the country. So if you give a tax cut,
but either way, they pay over half. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So if you give a tax cut, of course, those people are going to see a benefit, more of a benefit than I am. I might pay a couple $1,000s April 15th, whatever it is, right? They may pay. I know people that have to cut a check for $200,000-$300,000. If there's a tax cut, they're going to see more of a real benefit than I would, because they're paying more. So I think that my thing is this: the president in any administration, whether it's Obama, Biden, Reagan, Bush, whoever it is, has little to nothing to do with the economy, except for the fact that maybe their policies may impact the economy down the road. So if you have COVID and Biden comes into office, COVID is kind of waning, but you still want to keep feeding people money, that will cause inflation, as Robert Reich said, who is Obama's economic advisor. So there's those kind of things. But for the most part, the economy is going to go up and down, up and down, up and down. The only thing that Trump gives a buzz to the economy is because he's the same as the people who are creating the jobs, who are doing the stock buybacks and doing those kinds of things. But if you talk to any real Wall Street trader or anybody, they want divided government. They either want a Republican in the White House and the House and Senate split between the Republican and the Democrat, or a Democrat in the White House and vice versa in the House and Senate. And the reason why money wants it that way is because it slows down the government. It slows down decision making. It slows down what the government is able to do. It slows down far out crazy left ideas, far out crazy right ideas. It just slows everything down. And money likes slow growth. It likes that. It's drawn to that. So that's what I would say about that guy's commentary. You know, I've heard black people do better. That's right. Black people have done better under a Democrat president versus a Republican president. I've heard that many times. And I always say to them, the president doesn't spend a dime. Congress does. So, and what happens is, if you have a Democrat president, you usually have a Republican House during that term, and vice versa.
No, it makes sense. So yeah, I love where both of you are going, and it's just a reminder for anybody that's listening to this that the economy information is going to be attached to either party. I think the bigger point that y'all two are both making is understand that that is all propaganda, because of the time frame that even a policy, to y'all point, that even if it takes place down the line, it could be after that president is out of office before it actually plays its role. Go ahead, Emille.
I agree, and like, I'm a big supporter of the minimum wage, because, you know, as the descendant of formerly enslaved, if people can get away with paying me nothing, they would. And so I always say there should be some rule that minimizes the potential that people get paid nothing. The question that I'm going to ask, not this group, but the people that are watching, is where would minimum wage be if it weren't artificially depressed, right? If it just kept pace with inflation over the last 40 years, where would minimum wage be? And when you do that homework, and you can find that from lots of different sources, but when you do that homework, you find out that minimum wage as a policy is a very depressive state of affairs. And the reason why this is important is because when we see tax cuts looking like they affect the highest echelon of earners, which, you know, to be fair, the top 5% pay half or more of taxes, but they also own half or more of the nation's wealth. So we have to also see the full picture of why they're paying so much in taxes. It isn't just because they got money. It's because over the last 40 plus years, they have accumulated more and more wealth. And it's not due because they are hard workers or because they have been wise investors. It's because of policy. And policies like a depressive minimum wage has allowed, again, I'm going to go back to the productivity discussion, productivity to go up because of advances in work in the workforce, but not how much people are getting paid. So if we have a depressive force called policy keeping wages down, minimum wage, and we have tax cuts giving people a chance to accumulate more wealth, you got to have some wealth to accumulate more wealth. If you're keeping one group of people lower, it's easy for the other group to prosper. So we have to have these discussions that are more contextual than tax cuts for the wealthy or minimum wage for broke people. It's got to be comprehensive across the spectrum of the economy.
And one other thing I'll add for context. Oh, go ahead, Shelley, please.
No, I was going to say Emille is right, but
Shelley, you're breaking up, Shelley. Unfortunately, some reason you're breaking up. All right, y'all. Hopefully, you might have to cut out and come back in, Shelley, if you can hear me. What I was going to say to you, Emille, that we're going to go to another cut was, but it's not just but even the nuance also is it ain't just simply because they're accumulating wealth. The reality is, if you and I become a super successful business owner and we have 50 employees, a bigger reason that we're getting our tax cut is because that's 50 employees the government doesn't have to employ, and they end up taxing our 50 workers. And so,
absolutely,
yeah. And so what I'm just kind of highlighting that even that context still leaves out that typically the reward for the business owner is the fact that you're actually providing the jobs and welfare for your employees.
My point is that if you're going to, the problem is what happens to the money after the tax is cut? That's the question that's not being addressed. If the owner gets a tax cut, is that money flowing to their workers in the same proportion that they were giving that tax cut? And that's not happening in the economy. That's the problem that we're seeing. The tax cut hits and there's a largesse, but that's not trickling down, right? That's what Reagan called it, trickle down economics. It's not trickling down to the worker. We would know that because the median income would keep pace with productivity, but it's not. You have stock buybacks and all these other things that are happening that indicate that the tax cut money, which is exactly right when you say it's incentivizing people to employ other human beings, but that money is not going where it can be best spread throughout the economy. It's not happening. So we have to have a question. We have to answer the question, why isn't it going from where the people are getting the tax cut down to where the people are feeling the benefit of that tax cut?
I feel you, brother. Yeah, we lost Shelley on
for sure. I see that.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and go to our next cut. This is something that's near and dear to me, so just kind of bear with the cut. It's about 2 minutes.
Yeah, I was just going to say that Russell Brand in 2015 urged people not to vote either for Labour or the Tories, saying that it didn't matter, and subsequent to that, Ed Miliband, the party leader, met with him, and he changed his mind. The guy's always both sides equivalence, and it's been a long time coming, this sort of crap from him, so I would encourage people not to take him too seriously. He just plays to the room.
I think that whole point with Miliband was revealing. Like he sort of gravitates towards this apolitical, like all sides are the same, it doesn't matter, man, which is like a real tendency that like I think people like Jimmy Dore and stuff speak to, but like I do think like genuinely like he's a guy who like I guess what they call it signed on in the UK, like he was beneficiary of welfare policies, wasn't rich growing up as far as I understand, so he like does have like some like he'll side with Corbyn and Sanders, right? Like that is genuinely where his like certain class sympathies lie. But he's in this he's in this sort of podcast world, an audience world where it's playing to his worst sort of impulses.
Appreciate the call, and I will also add that one of the things that you don't have to do if you're convinced that both sides are exactly the same and they're all bad. You don't have to do shit. You don't have to read. You don't have to think about this stuff. It is completely knee-jerk. It is completely knee-jerk. You can sit there and say, a statistic, 50,000 people die a year because they don't have health insurance. But you also then have the ability to completely ignore the fact that like 600,000 more people just got health insurance because of a tiny little provision that we never even really contemplated in the American Rescue Act. Like, both those things, you can sort of like ignore one of them because you don't really care. At the end of the day, you don't really care.
So I wanted to kind of play that out. Obviously, it's not the U.S. that Sam Cedar's talking about, to a degree.
Right.
At least the guy that called in wasn't, if you will. But what I wanted to point out, because I see this quite often happening in the African-American community specifically, and it may be happening in other communities, but specifically what I'm very aware of, this idea of both sides are the same.
Right.
Which is juxtaposed against whether your vote matters or not. We did a whole show on this on Mental Dialogue. And so I love how Sam Cedar is highlighting the weakness, one, in that perspective, because he's highlighting, you can point to one thing and say, see, both sides are the same, or this side doesn't care, and completely live out what actually happens. And I always like to say this, the concept that both sides are the same is a very linear thought that is so inaccurate, and then I'll say completely disrespects our ancestors, because not only in their effort to make sure we had equal protection under the law via our right to vote, if you will, but we just talked about on the last show, Emille, how voter suppression is a normal aspect of politics, kind of regardless of what group you're in. So no group is trying to make sure one group is not voting if both sides are the same. You're trying to ensure this other side doesn't vote because
100.
You're trying to get what the hell you want. If both sides are the same, there would be no need for suppression. Everybody calls it a game and don't realize it's really two sides up against one another. Go ahead, Brian.
So, you've heard the phrase politricks, right. And I often hear it too. And typically it's Black folk who are frustrated with the system, and so they're like, both sides are the same. It's all politics, right? And my point is, and I have to kind of cut with a scalpel in this one respect. Foreign policy has a lot of inertia behind it, right? So you have policies from both parties that don't often look significantly different. Foreign policy is very much a lot of inertia behind it. But domestic policy, what happens inside the borders of this country, absolutely has high contrast. And if you're not careful, you'll conflate the two. And this is what I see a lot of people do, is they'll say, oh, both parties are the same, and then point to something overseas. And I'm savvy enough to understand that foreign policy has a lot more complexity to it in terms of what we're trying to accomplish and what we can extricate ourselves from or create the opportunities for, versus what happens inside the borders, which is a lot different. If you look at the Department of Justice, for instance, the Office of Civil Rights, you will see a 50% cut from Democrat to Republican and about a 100% increase from Republican to Democrat, right? So obviously civil rights is something that is 100% controlled within the borders. And that is one giant contrast. And there are other giant contrasts that people don't see when they say both parties are the same. So I hate this discussion when people say it's all politics, both parties are the same, because it ignores some very obvious points that have to be addressed in the context of what is each party trying to advance during its campaign, because they're vastly different. And there's going to be some contrast that you can vote for or vote against based on what you want.
No, absolutely. And it's just something that I detest, and I lean to what Sam Cedar said. It just gives you an excuse not to pay attention because you don't really care. Go ahead, bro.
Well, and this is one of my frustrations with the American voting public, and especially with Black people in America. We have diluted our power as a voting bloc, because we have said so many things like, it ain't nothing changed. Do not come at me with the words ain't nothing changed. I dare you to go back to 1924 and say, in whatever context you want to say, 1924 was better for Black people. It was not. right? There were good things about 1924. Don't get me wrong. We had a very strong community, but do we understand why we had a strong community? Because there was terror in our community that was affecting our community. That terror, that open terror, is something that we don't talk about because our great grandparents and grandparents were so traumatized by that terror. They didn't want to talk about it because they didn't want to relive the terror. But I'm very much, after I read all the history I read, I'm convinced I would never want to go back to 1924. And I don't know a person who studied history who would say that. So when
I study history, and I would even go as far as we even sensationalize how strong our communities are because we've been fortunate enough now to go back and find out about the Rosewoods and the Black Wall Streets and, the Winston-Salems, where there were these Black enclaves.
Absolutely.
But the reality is, when we learn it, we kind of over-romanticize it, not realizing that 98% of our community still were not in those enclaves. So
they were living in terror. And the Great Migration is really the great flee from terror. And when we understand that, we can have these discussions about what does voting do for us. I hear a lot of Black people say, voting ain't changed, voting has changed. You're absolutely right. Voting alone has changed nothing. But as a package of efforts, all these efforts, demonstrations, labor slowdowns, and all the things that we've done, even armed, I won't say revolution, but the threat of arms against the system has made us very potent as a force for change in this country. So yes, you add voting to a lot of other things that must happen in order for change to occur. This country does not like change on behalf of Black people, so we have to force it. And the way we force it is by a multifaceted approach. One of those facets is voting. So when we give up that facet, we're losing a lever that can help us change for the better.
And I always give personal examples of how even the one lever actually works. Because when we say, what has it done or what has it changed? And I've lived in different parts of Atlanta, so I always highlight these personal stories. But I live south in Atlanta now, but I remember north at one point, there was a tax that was going to make the difference between having a Head Start or not. And so for those Black families that needed a Head Start versus having to pay for daycare, my vote made a difference in whether they had a Head Start or not. I also seen, a vote. Just got a lot of background stuff, brother. Let me mute you. You got a lot of background, Emille?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'm working on it.
Okay, gotcha. So I just like to highlight that we take a linear approach and look for voting to get something for us as a Black people without remembering we too are American citizens, and these policies that come out. Matter of fact, this next cut will highlight specific policies, because there are quite often specific policies that are affecting us in our lives, in our Black communities, for example. So let me play this next cut. And again, I just hate when people look at it from such a broad base and actually don't realize what we actually get. So hold on one second. Let me play this next cut. Let me pull you back live as well, Emille, right after this cut.
Man, hell no, I ain't voting for no Kamala Harris for president. What has that lady ever did for Black people? Watch this. What has Kamala Harris ever did for Black people?
Kamala Harris has undertaken several initiatives and actions that have aimed to benefit Black Americans, both as a U.S. Senator and as Vice President. As a U.S. Senator, advocating for criminal justice reform. First Step Act. Harris supported the bipartisan First Step Act, which aimed to reform the criminal justice system, including reducing mandatory minimum sentences for nonviolent drug offenses, which disproportionately affect Black communities. Anti-lynching legislation. Harris co-sponsored the Justice for Victims of Lynching Act, which aimed to make lynching a federal hate crime. Justice in Policing Act. Harris co-authored this comprehensive police reform bill, which includes measures to ban chokeholds, establish a national database of police misconduct, and end qualified immunity for law enforcement officers. Harris introduced the Lift Livable Incomes for Families Today, the Middle Class Act, which proposed a tax credit that would benefit low and middle income families, including many Black families. Rent Relief Act. Harris introduced legislation aimed at providing rent relief to families spending more than 30% of their income on rent, benefiting many Black Americans facing housing affordability issues. As Vice President, Harris has supported and advocated for measures within the American Rescue Plan, which included significant funding for Black-owned businesses, expanded the child tax credit, and provided direct financial support to families disproportionately affected by the pandemic, including Black Americans. Harris has championed the Black Maternal Health Momnibus Act, which addresses the Black maternal health crisis through investments in social determinants of health, funding for community-based organizations, and improvements in data collection and research. Harris has been a vocal advocate for the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the For the People Act, aimed at protecting and expanding voting rights, particularly for communities of color. Harris has worked to secure increased funding for historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, recognizing their critical role in providing education and opportunities for Black students. These efforts reflect her ongoing commitment to addressing issues that disproportionately impact Black Americans.
She still ain't Black.
I saw that clip before, and I love it because that's a laundry list of bills that have been introduced to Congress. We know how Congress works, and Shelley was 100% right. Wall Street loves a Congress that is damn near gridlock. The only time they don't like that gridlock is when it comes to when it messes with credit, the good faith and credit of the nation. Otherwise, they love that gridlock. So she's introducing all of this legislation into that gridlock, which we know may not necessarily go anywhere. But the point is, those bills represent a group of people who today do not understand what would happen if they were to pass. Those bills, if they were to pass, would have a material effect on the quality of life.
And some of those have. Let's be real clear. Just most of those are the ones that were passed. Those are not the ones that are being introduced. Those are the ones that have been passed. Again, just to be we're politically conscious, to be fair.
For sure.
Like the first one, the first act that actually happened under Trump, and he claimed credit for it. And
for sure.
So
the First Step Act was something that was in work for 20 plus years. And he got it over the finish line. So he should get credit for that, because that's hard work. Just like Reagan got credit for the Cold War and ending the Cold War, but it took 40 years of work before that actually transpired. So there are and I agree. And this is the point that I want to make, though, that all those bills, if you look at them, especially if you look at them in aggregate, if you look at all of them together, they have a material effect on Black people's quality of life right now.
Absolutely.
Right. And this is why it's so important that we stop, folding our arms up and say, I'm not voting. When you have someone who, granted, she is not the perfect candidate for a variety of reasons, but you know what she is doing? She's putting her message into her legislation. She's doing it. And the other side is doing the same thing. All of the things that they want for certain populations, they're putting into legislation that they want passed. So you have competing sets of legislation from different candidates who, if they're elected, will have a material effect on the quality of life of the people they're trying to serve, or more importantly, the people they're trying to court. So when we say, I want tangibles, that's a laundry list of tangibles. Absolutely. And there's more tangibles than those, because a lot of programs for Black people are wrapped inside, right? They're covered by programs that affect a larger portion. But the reason why that program even exists is because they were appealing to us. They were trying to get us squared away. And you will not see a legislation that says at the top, for Black people only, and then, be it therefore known, hear ye therefore, right? It's not going to say that. It's going to be for everybody, but the instigator for that legislation, the prime targeted audience for that legislation, is always us. So when we say we want tangibles, unless you understand how to look for them, you may miss the boat. And then therefore you'll say, my vote doesn't matter. Everybody's the same.
Absolutely. The 1968 Equal Protection Act doesn't say Black. It was only for us.
Right.
But it does not say Black, to your point.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so it's just very frustrating. I like being here in Atlanta, like just going the last couple of years with the inflation and things that are, again, that were inevitable regardless of who was president. We talked about that on the last show. But to see seniors get their medicine pricing reduced because of specific acts that targeted those that were having to pay those pricing. And the reality is we know a lot of our community is hurting with needing to get access to their medicine and things of that nature.
Right.
And that's, like you said, that's kept in mind when those acts are being passed, that it's going to disproportionately, in a good way, affect our community. So you can't say, what did we get, when I know there are seniors literally that live near me that now can afford their medicine because of politics.
Right. And these are the things that if I accuse the Democrats of something consistently not doing well, it's what you just said. Showing the effect of these policies to the audiences they're trying to court. They do a terrible job. And I love the fact that the Democratic Party wants to court Black men voters because they think they can squeeze out more than the 80+% they're going to get out of us, which is fine. I have no problem. But don't do it by browbeating us. Do it by courting us with the results of the policies you've enacted, because those policies and the results matter. Just like, the consent decrees under Trump, 1. Under Biden, a dozen, right? Under Obama, dozens, plural, because there are ways for the Department of Justice to investigate and hold accountable police departments that are absolutely treating our community unfairly. And it's not a perfect solution, but it's part of a solution.
Absolutely.
Those consent decrees away, that tells the police that there's no accountability.
No accountability whatsoever. We can't risk that.
I don't understand why people can't see that. But again, I blame the Democrats for this. Absolutely. Very specifically. You have the data, but you're not
presented
to court.
Presented. And so when you go and talk to the no vote crowd, they literally will go, what has been done? I can't fault them, because the people that should be touting the record rather play identity politics. I hate both sides play identity politics.
Right.
It's in a different way, but to the same degree. Right.
And the thing is, the Republicans want to say, we want to leave you alone. Well, if you look at the history of Black people in America, being left alone is a luxury. It is an absolute luxury for Black people to be left alone. If you want to say that, demonstrate to us how powerful that could be. Because when we're left alone, we can rise. We can do things that allow us to build our own communities and our own economies. But you can't say we want to leave you alone and then not show us the result of what that means. So you have to be very clear when you're courting an audience what you've done for them.
And that's where I fault. That's why I say the identity politics are played the exact same, because you're right in how in this situation you just used it, how in a sense the Republicans in general will frame it, but neither side is presenting out loud the actual policies in most cases. Now, I will say, to Trump's credit, when he caters to our community, he lined up that I damn near doubled. For example, I doubled the entrepreneurs in the African-American community. It was at 6% when he went into office. It was at 11%. Biden and Harris, they're at 13%. They've never mentioned it. They've actually took it higher, but they've never mentioned it. And I'm not on either side. I'm just calling the numbers for what they are.
I mean, that's kind of the principle that pushes people away from the voting booth. Is so our ancestors who didn't have the right to vote were willing to sacrifice their lives for that right. So then the next question is, what informed their thinking? Well, it was they wanted to participate in their own nation's activities. They wanted to say, I live here. I need to have a vote. This is part of the package of being a citizen.
Let me add this one context. It ain't just simply that I'm getting my taxes taken anyway.
Yeah.
Like, that's what equal protection of the law is. Like people miss that our ancestors were saying, hey, we don't get our roads paved over here. But they were still, for those that were working, because a lot of ancestors were, like, a lot of the people don't really understand what happened with the Industrial Revolution. Like, the world was have and have nots. 60% of the country was in poverty. like
Right.
all groups, right? A much higher for our community, 80%. But I'm just highlighting that if you are able to secure a job and your taxes will be taken, you can't get your road paid without representation. So it wasn't just simply my vote. It's understanding that you are taking my money anyway. So let me make sure y'all pave my road over here too.
My schools don't have the right facilities. They don't have the right books, the textbooks. So my students aren't getting the education they should be getting, given the money I'm giving to my government. My government doesn't respond to my, what does the Constitution say? Redress of grievances. When I have a grievance, it is not heard by my government. That is a problem. There are things about our government that we have to push for all the time.
And we have a right for because they're taking our taxes. And that's the part that
if we don't understand it, so all the people who don't vote, and I always hear, people say, and I endorse this kind of, I mean, it's not the best thing, but if you don't vote, you should not be complaining, because to your point, Montoya, you are paying taxes, and those taxes are being spent, whether or not it's on your behalf. In your mind, it's on your behalf. And if they're not going to the community you want to serve, then you're leaving out an opportunity to bless your community, whether that's your geographic neighborhood, Black people, your family, your business. But if you don't vote, you have no say into how those taxes are being spent, which means you're at the mercy of someone else's agenda.
Absolutely. So if you have a little extra time, I know we pretty much here near the end, but I want to play this other cut, and I know we won't be able to do it in 4 minutes. So I wanted to see if you had a little extra time, or I won't play this cut if you don't.
No, I really don't. I have to go on the hour. I have some pressing things that must happen.
Okay, no doubt.
I appreciate.
So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna play this. I'm gonna see how long this cut is to see if I can even pull out. So I'm gonna play a cut, give you a thought, and I'll stay on longer myself because I definitely want. It's just because now we're talking about the identity politics. You and I have both lined up. This is what you're getting for your vote. I hate that both parties play to the actual identity stuff and don't present specific things. And I think this is an example for us to highlight now the identity stuff and how belittling it is. So let me play this real quick, and we'll get your response and let you go.
I mean, Candace, this whole sort of premise, this sort of weird thing, which frankly is quite racist. There's no other way to look at it. That you should judge according to your skin color and feel a duty, a compulsion to do so, seems to me to be racist.
It is fundamentally racist, and it's something that I think Black people are right to be upset about. And then there's also this. You are correct to say that there's nothing about Kamala Harris or Barack Obama, for being frank, that is Black. I covered this on my show yesterday, went through Barack Obama's history. There is something that is very cartoonish about them working to Blackify a politician before they run for office. And what I mean by that is, like, Barry Soetoro, first 8 years of his life grew up in Indonesia. Okay. Then he was with his white mother and his Indonesian stepfather. He then went to Hawaii, which had a population of just 5,000 Black people. 86% of them were in the military, and attended a school that is $31,000 per year. And it was all white people. He was raised by his white grandparents, the Dunnans. He's never lied about this, by the way. He then went off to college and had a white dorm mate, dated a white woman. There's nothing about Barack Obama's history that gives him, in my viewpoint, like the stepping ground to be talking to the brothers about the Black American experience. If you've ever even been to Hawaii, it doesn't even feel like America. Genuinely, it feels like we took this country from an Asian country, took this state from an Asian country. And so when you realize that, and you see how right before they run, suddenly the story changes. They drop a book and they work to Blackify themselves. Obama didn't know his father, his Kenyan father, growing up, and now all of a sudden he wants to lean into this stereotype. To me, it feels like they're both wearing blackface. I can't sort through all of Kamala's various accents. There's so many of them. She's in front of a Latina crowd. Suddenly she's Selena, and she's speaking like a Latina. And then she's in front of a Jamaican crowd and she's dropping man. I can't deal with it. It is way too much Hollywood acting for me. Then she's got the black scent going and girl, what are you talking about? She's in front of a white crowd. She's speaking like a California Valley girl. I don't trust it. Yeah, I just do not trust somebody that slips that quickly through so many personalities. There's nothing about her upbringing, extraordinarily wealthy. Just she was sworn in Congress as an Indian American. Her mother is Indian. She grew up with an Indian experience and was proud of that until she ran for office for president of the United States. And that is something that I am not comfortable with. I do not accept this narrative that she should be speaking about herself as a Black woman. It's not okay, and I fully reject it.
And so I'll let you go with your thought. And my thought, I'll just say to you, Emille, for me, it's not to talk about what Candace said.
Right.
It's the frustration with playing that up versus the things that we were just talking about. And that's an indictment that I think we both have to the party. And I think whatever happens with this election, they're going to have to learn to start playing to the actual results versus focusing on whether a candidate is Black or not. It don't matter in the scheme of things, but that's what plays up, and I hate that.
Well, so here's you know, I'm not going to both sides of this, but a man who has billion-dollar businesses and gold-plated toilets, you know, is not a working man. So we can have these discussions on both sides. And to your point, the devolution of American politics, and I go back to some of the really rough times in American politics, Tippecanoe and all this kind of stuff under U.S. Grant, and some of the really rough and tumble politics of the 19th century and early 20th century. They were brutal. Like today we say, oh, America's never been more divided than it is now. And I say, well, first of all, since the Civil War, that's not true. Definitely including the Civil War, that's not true. And this is one of the reasons why we're divided, because we're not having political discussions about politics and policy. We're having discussions about identity and about ways of thinking that make me better than you. So my tribe is better than your tribe. This tribalism is infecting our politics. It has for decades. The problem is that years ago, I mean, you can go back to the Reagan era, before the Reagan era, and even up to through the Clinton era, politics was still mostly about policy. Yes, there was some identity in there, but you get to the Bush administration.
They slicked the language so it wouldn't be obvious.
I promise you.
That's how they did it back then, but go ahead.
When you get past the Clinton administration and into the second Bush, the Bush 2, George W. Bush, you start to see this very slick shift toward just identity politics and leaving out a lot of politics. And what's funny is if you go back and you look, almost always the Democrats will talk policy and sound so square and boring, it's hilarious. And then when they do identity, it's also very square and rigid, right? It's not nearly as authentic as it seems like it's coming from the other side. And this is why you and I have a beef with politics writ large, because people's lives are affected by the policies that are enacted by either party when they're in charge of Congress or the presidency. These executive orders have ramifications on a day-to-day basis. And so when we don't talk about what happens to the potholes when your mayor chooses to use money that could have been spent to fix potholes and fix the infrastructure of your school system and fix the things that affect your daily life versus maybe going to recruit business from overseas locations and trying to make Atlanta the hub for overseas investment. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but you can see the benefit of those policies in real time. And when you don't talk about those policies, you're missing an opportunity to educate the voter and give them a sense that what they're voting for has a specific outcome they can measure and see. If Kamala Harris chooses to use an accent one different per day for the whole year, I don't care. What policies did she advance? How did she advance them? And what was the effect of those policies if they were enacted? If we have those discussions, we start to tend to care less about it. I want to see voter participation at 75, 80%. Minnesota is probably the best state in the union at about 75% for voter participation. I want to see voter participation at 60, 65, 70% in primaries and off years and 80, 85% during the presidential elections. Exactly. But we're not seeing that because people are like, all you guys talk about is LGBTQ plus, immigrants. Is she Black? Is she not Black? What accent is she? They're just, is Trump too orange? Is he too this or like, oh my, you are missing out on an opportunity to have really strong discussions about whether or not this candidate's policies make your life materially better or not.
Exactly. I want to respect your time because you got to go, but I need your prediction before you go. And by what percentage? So, what's your prediction for the election? Because we saved it to the end. We lost.
Okay, so I'm going to give you what I think is going to happen in the electoral college.
All right. Okay.
I'll use the electoral college.
Okay, gotcha.
Right. So I think you're going to see about 320, 330 Harris and about 220 Trump. Whatever the 215 Trump. So it's 330, 215. That's where I'm thinking it's going to be about in the electoral college. It's going to be about about 3-2 ratio for a win for Harris. I think people have slept on some of the things that she's done that are actually making a difference in the middle because she's got so many Republicans who endorse her. And I don't know if that's a good thing, but I do know it carries weight in the middle because she's looking like someone that moderate Republicans can support because a lot of moderate Republicans have said they're going to support her. And I think that's going to be the difference.
So the polls look razor thin. I'm shocked at your number. I actually think that it's going to be a 3 to 4% higher win for Trump. And the reason I say that is the foreign policy part of things. And our biggest budget, 20% goes to the military, and there's still this perception. We have people inside of Trump's camp that have highlighted how well he's done on foreign policy while he was in government. We've also had people inside the camp who are no longer endorsing him that says he's terrible in the Situation Room. We got different things on that. But now the reality of things is perception is reality. And so I agree that I'm going to get my prediction. Yeah. So I'm just highlighting that my prediction is not about where I'm voting. It's about the prediction.
Oh, yeah. But the reason.
Yeah, let me say this. Let me say this. So the prediction is based on how much we spend on having the #1 military in the world. Yeah. I think the perception will not allow enough people to put her in place because of how they perceive what America will be on the world stage. So I think that's
I absolutely can see that. And the only reason I say what I say is because I think the popular vote is going to be what you're talking about. The popular vote is going to be razor thin. The electoral college, I think, is not. That's the difference.
So if the popular vote is razor thin, you think you can? Well, you can't get that big credit because of how they fall. Matter of fact, on the next Political Conscious, I'll do a video on electoral college. I was gonna say let's try to do one for the polls after everything's done. You know, like just do a follow up one. What's the polls called once they finish? I forgot the name, just slipped my mind. The after polls. What do you call? It's a specific name for it. It's just slipping my mind right now. But I want to make sure we may sneak one in just to go over electoral college. Sure. People understand. Exit polls. That's what I'm saying. So I want to definitely do one after the exit polls, but we might need to sneak one in just explaining electoral college once again. Just to
me. Let's go. I'm down.
All right, we'll figure it out. Yeah, we may do that on our own, even if we can't get Shelley, just to go over it, just to give people the facts.
You know, he's gonna be busy at the Grand Hyatt. Hey, Shelley, man, I know you couldn't come back. We love you, brother. We appreciate you. Always good to talk to you and see you. So next time, I can't wait to chop it up with you again.
No, absolutely. Y'all stay tuned. This is Politically Conscious, trying to bring it to all substance, no fluff. That's our goal here, man. So thank y'all. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. Thank you, Emille. Hey, nice. We'll explain that. We'll explain it on the next. Yeah, we'll explain the double V on the next show.
All right. Peace.
All right, sounds good, brother.